What is going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel and episode number 3 in this series on creating an MMORPG. So today we are actually going to be building this part right over here, and it's not everything I thought I was going to get done for this video, but it took a little while to set this stuff up and actually go over what I was doing. And if you guys missed the previous videos, be sure to go back. I covered building this in episode number 2. In today's episode, we're going to be going over building these level bar things on the right hand side. And to do this, we're actually using SVGs, so be sure to stick around. It's going to be super cool. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is where we are at the beginning of this video. And so far, this is what we have from episode 1 and episode 2. We have these that we built in the last episode, and then just this stuff that was here when I showed you guys for the first episode. So for today's episode, you guys already know what it's going to be because I've already shown you what the final product is. But we're just going to jump over here and let you guys know that this is what we're going to be building right here. So I'm going to just throw together these, and depending on time, I might actually do this and this here too. But for now, let's go ahead and just start building this structure. So if we jump into our page right, I'm going to go ahead and just build a div here. And we're just going to go ahead and give it an ID of PR skills, because this will actually be the, like I said, the wrapper that goes around these circles that we have here. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and just style those two divs now. So we'll jump under the page left and we'll make our new page right. And here we'll actually just copy what we wrote for page left and put it here. And then we'll go ahead and just give that so we'll just add here a left of 0 to specify, and then we'll go ahead and give this a right of 0. So those will be exactly the same, just be on the right. And just to show you guys that that's working, we'll just do a background real quick. Oh, okay, I was confused for a second because I was wondering why it wasn't showing up, and I remembered we don't actually have a width on it. The reason why it worked with the page left is because we had that option inside of it before, but now we don't have that option anymore. So what we could do is just do our PR skills. And if we gave this a width for now, just say 50 pixels, and we don't know exactly what the height's going to be. It's probably going to be dynamic, so we'll say it's about that. And yeah, actually we could just do that, and then now you'll see that bar show up because we have something in there with dimensions. So now what we'll go ahead and do is we want to make this skills. So we're not exactly sure what the height's going to be yet because we don't know how big our circles are going to be. So we'll leave the width and the height there, but we just want to, first of all, let's add the background that we have here, remove it from there and add it to here so we can actually see that. And now we want to center this vertically. So we'll go ahead and make it a position absolute. And then now to center a box like this vertically, there's a few ways you can do it. It depends on whether you have the height defined or not, which we do have the height defined right now, but later if we don't, then we're gonna have to change this a little bit. But in this case, we do a top 50%, which if you see now, it'll actually push, or hang on a sec. Okay, so this is an example of sometimes when you just get confused over stupid things. So I was like searching for why this wasn't showing up here. As you can see, that our white bar isn't showing up, and that's because when we positioned it absolute, basically it's removed from the normal flow, which means that because this is a width of auto, we'll just fix this by saying that this is 50 pixels. Now it actually shows up because there's a width. So we want to center this vertically. So here, obviously we did a top of 50%, which actually pushes it down from the top of this bar 50% of the container. So this amount right here is 50% of the container. So what we want to do now is we want to move this back up now. So to move it back up, we could use the margin left property and just subtract half of this div's height, which is 250, so we do 125. And now you'll see that this guy is, whoops, not margin left, we want to do margin top. And now this guy is centered perfectly, and if we change our height, it'll just adjust and work correctly for us there. So we have our container, and like I said, I don't know exactly what the height is going to be on that container yet, but what we'll do is just go ahead and build one of our little circles that we have here right in the middle. To do this, I'm just going to build some HTML And so inside of this skills, we'll define a skill for us to actually use. So let me actually figure out what the best structure is going to be for this. All right, so what I just did real quick was I decided that I'm actually going to use the old circles here as a reference because I don't remember exactly what I did when I set it up. So in this case, these are the styles that are going into that right now on the current site. And so as you can see, we have a background, and then I'm doing some transform rotations on the actual SVG and a scale negative because normally I think the bar goes from like this side and then goes this way around. So what we want to do is, since we want it to go from here and go this way, you just have to kind of rotate it and flip it and do a couple things to get it to look correct. But what we can go ahead and do is we can build this, and actually I'm going to go ahead and open up the HTML page real quick. Okay, so I jumped over and I opened up, it's actually not an HTML page that I was writing it in because I'm drawing them out dynamically, which I probably will end up doing that with a lot of the stuff that I've written so far. Basically, I just have a string here that I'm printing with different values for each of the professions. What I'm going to do is kind of use this as a reference. This is what we're really looking for, is this skill wrap, and then we have the SVG defined inside of that, and then this is where we created our circles. So on our HTML page, I'm just going to define a new class, and we'll just call it PR skill. So inside of this skill class, we are going to define, let's actually define our SVG inside of this. So our SVG, and actually we don't need to give that a class or anything, but we will give it a view box. And now the view box, basically this is just going to be 0, 0, and then I just default it to 100, 100. So what it is it's 0, X and Y, and then 100 on the width and height. So the width and height, the reason you set, you don't have to do 100, 100. It doesn't really matter what you do. Actually, you could do any number you want. It's just so that you can create it. Everything inside of it will be based on that width and height that you created. All right, so we'll just go ahead and finish our HTML structure here. So we know that what we want to have in this case is not only one circle, but we want to have two, because we want to add the white circle and then the colored circle that's above it. So we're going to have two circles in this. So basically we'll add a circle, and then we'll go ahead and give this a CX, which is essentially the center X value. And we set this based on this. So we're 100 and 100. So if we want this to be centered, we would do our 50 and our 50 to make it in the center. And now the radius is something we'll have to figure out, adjust a little bit, but we could just say like 46 might be a good radius. And the reason we don't go all the way to the edge, well, one, because we obviously aren't going all the way to the edge of this circle here, but also this radius would be from the center of this line. So not the edges. I mean, you could, but default it's going to be from the center of that. So in this case, if we set it to 46, and then let's just say we add a stroke width of 7. In this case, we could actually set the stroke equal to, let's just say, our white color for now, and then make sure that the fill, because by default the fill is going to be black, so let's just say the fill is none. And then see, now what we have is our circle showing up on the screen, so that's a very good start right now. What we would do here then is we want to give this a specific height. So right now we're setting 50 pixels on the width, and that's why it looks like that. So if we actually just change this to like 80, you'll see that that'll scale up a lot more, and that's probably even too big for what we're looking for. So if we just do 70, that looks like it'll be about proportional, maybe a little smaller because you know, we have the container that it's going to be inside of. And actually what we can do is just define our PR skill. Yeah, so we could just give our PR skill for now a background of, and we'll just copy a background that I'm already using on the header, so the header has the dark gradient class. So we'll just copy that and use that for our skill. You'll notice now we have our actual box showing up there. So firstly, let's just give this a border radius of 50% to make that a circle. And now you'll see it doesn't fit exactly on there. It's kind of hard to see right now just because it's so dark. And what we could do is we could add like a light box shadow. Now we want to clean up our SVG a little bit because obviously this isn't thick enough, first of all, and it's also not supposed to be touching the edges. If you look at our design again, we actually need to bring that SVG in and just make it a little bit thicker. We already have our stuff that we wrote out in our HTML. So we're gonna go ahead and just decrease the radius in this case because it's not gonna be as large, and then we can go ahead and just, well, let's try 10 and see if it's too big. So yeah, it's a little bit too thick, I would say. We'll do 9. That looks a lot better. Now you'll notice it's not fully centered on the X and the Y, and that's mainly because we didn't define a height on this thing, which is generally the best practice. So what we'd want to do is define our width on the PR skill, which is the wrapper around the SVG, remember. Define that as a width of 70 and a height of 70 pixels because we're getting a little bit of push on that. So that cleans it up nicely. And then also there just isn't enough border around there. So all we need to do is, again, just jump into the index. We'll do like 40, let's say. All right, so that looks, I think looks a lot better. I mean, in terms of what we're working with. So in this case, we can actually copy all of these and move them to our style sheet. So we don't have to be copying and pasting those like crazy. So we'll actually jump onto here. We'll make a couple classes. So first of all, we'll say the PR skill and then the circle, because just whatever's inside the circle. And the circles are all going to have pretty much all of these. Again, we have to change these to the correct CSS format. So yeah, once you clean those up, now we won't have to worry about copying and pasting those styles on the index page. They'll just be predefined for us there. And what we can do now is we could use our nth of type again because we're going to have 2 circles, remember. So the first one, actually in this case, we wouldn't do this here. What we'd want to do is actually make a separate class skill circle and then do an nth of type, just because there are going to be a bunch of, most of these are going to stay the same. So really the only thing that's going to be changing is the stroke. So if we copy this, delete it, and then paste it here, and then let's just give this an RGBA of our 255, 255, and our 0.2. So now you'll see that the circle will turn to our lighter color there. And now what we can do is go ahead and do this again and just define a second one, and then we'll go ahead and copy, let's grab a color to use here, or we have a color defined already in our CSS. We'll just grab the forging color, which is right here. So yeah, I pasted in that number 2. Now that actual circle doesn't exist yet, so we would just copy and paste this, and now what you'll see is that orange circle is just sitting on top of our white circle. So if we wanted to actually add, because right here, obviously this is going to need to be dynamic, so I'm going to have to add all this into the script later. But right now we're just kind of building the static elements so we can use them as a reference later. But here what we want to do, well, first we can add a little bit of a box shadow to this because as you can see, it's kind of popping out a little bit. But we're not actually going to notice that on top of the white until we adjust this size, which what you're going to use for this is actually the dash array and dash offset properties. Those are what you're actually going to be editing. So if we take a look at our JavaScript page for the main site, see we have an update skills, which is related to our update skill, which actually is updating the dash offset whenever we call it. So you can see we're working with both the stroke dash array and the stroke dash offset. So the stroke dash array basically needs to get set to the diameter, the circumference of this circle, which in this case is going to be 2 pi times the radius. And so the radius is 40, which is what we defined here. Here, I just added our stroke dash array number, which basically is the 2 times pi times our 41. So essentially what that's going to do is give us, like when I refresh, it's going to give us that full thing. It's not going to change right now, and the reason being because we need to be rotating this, it's kind of difficult to explain, but we're going to be editing the dash array, and it'll make more sense when we actually add a dash array. And this dash array now is, dash offset is what I meant to do. dash offset is going to be part of this number. So like it's going to be 1 through this number, which is basically going to push that bar around in a circle around what we're doing. So in this case, just saying, let's just say like 50 for now. And you'll see that that's going to move. It's very subtle there because it's being covered up. And actually, just to fix that for us, let's just give this a 70 so we can see the entire thing. So you can see it's already starting to push over. And now the bigger we make this number, the further it's going to push over. So that is what we would work with when we actually edit this in script. So when we edit in the script, we just change the dash array offset, and you'll see that this again isn't rotating in the correct direction and isn't facing the right way. And that's why we add those other scale things. So if I jump in here real quick and just copy what we wrote already. So let's just copy this stuff, our transforms, which rotate and scale this. And you'll notice if I put this into our, in this case, make a new style for our skill SVG, and paste those into our actual SVG, you'll notice that now it flips around. That's exactly how we want it to look. So in terms of matching our Illustrator file that we've done, I believe it's pretty close. It looks like it's pretty much there. Sweet, so now you'll notice this isn't centered, and we want to center these. So the idea is we want to center the container that it's inside of. We would first get rid of the height. So the height defined it at 250. Now it's just going to define to it the contents of what's inside of it. So that's exactly what we want, but you'll notice now it's not centered vertically. So we want to actually center this in the middle without knowing the height. So we can't use this method anymore. So we would get rid of our margin top and in this case our top position. And what we're going to do is use a we would keep our top position there. And then what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a transform, and we want to translate this guy. So we want to translate him 50% back. So remember this is going to push us to here. What the translate is going to do is actually send us, if we do a negative 50%, or sorry, on the X we do 0, and on the Y we're going to do negative 50%. And that negative 50% is actually the size of the actual div itself. So this div. So since that div is this container, this little box, it's going to be half of that. So you can see now it pushed us up, and now we are perfectly centered. So if we do this, you'll see it's still right in the middle. Now we have our container, and now we can pretty much add as many of those as we want. So same as we did in the last episode where we copy and pasted a bunch of stuff, we can now go ahead and just copy and paste everything we have here. And you'll notice we get our 3 set up here. So before we copy and paste a bunch of times, we actually want to add our, let's say like an H3 for the level. So if we wanted to be level 45, you'll see that now we have a little 45 here, but obviously it's not in the right place at all. So we need to go ahead and we'll jump inside, and actually this is inside of our SVG, but we actually want it to be inside of just our div, so outside of the SVG. So we'll go ahead and now jump inside of our CSS, and our PR skill, we're just going to define our PR skill H3 now. And we're going to go ahead and give it a position of absolute, and we're going to just give it a text align center and a line height of 75 pixels. And now what we want to do, but we need to actually position it because we positioned it absolute, but we need to actually tell it that it's going to be in the left. It's going to be relative to the left and top. So now we got there, and the only issue is just set the width of the box to 100%. And so now it'll take that div and put it right there in the middle. So awesome, we have that set up now. Now that that is set up, like I said, we basically can just go into our index and we can just copy and paste this div that we wrote. So we can put an extra one in there. And now we want to make it so that, well, first of all, that this div is actually kind of pushed over a little bit. In this case, first we want to add a left. So right now the left is set to 0, but we want to actually change this to be like a left of negative 20, or in this case, sorry, just 20. So we want to move that over so that you can still see the level, but it's a little bit in there. And let's add margins to those real quick too. So if we want to add a margin to all of them except the bottom one, because the bottom one's obviously not going to have one under it, so we don't need to add a margin because then that will mess up our, our centering. So what we can do is actually grab our PR skill, and we'll make another selector here for PR skill, and then we'll just do not. So the not selector is if you want to exclude a specific one. So we'll do not last child, and then we'll add a margin bottom of 15 pixels and see what that looks like. Perfect. So now the 15 pixels is applied to this one, but not this one. So now what we can do is go ahead and set up our transition that we wanted. So when we hover over this part, it'll actually pop out of the side. So on the skills, we can add our transition. And in this case, what we'll do is actually change this so that it's not editing the left position, but that it's editing the transform. What we're gonna do is go ahead and just define, so I removed the left 20 pixels, and what we're gonna do is actually add that to the translate on the X. So now if we go ahead, it'll still be in the same place because we're moving it with the transform. And then we'll just say we wanna edit the transform over 0.2 with an ease. And then inside of here, we want to just now add a skills hover selector and just set its transform equal to that translate. In this case being, well, we'll actually go out 20 pixels or negative 20. We'll go to negative 20 pixels, and then we want to keep our negative 50. Then we'll go ahead and do that, and you'll see when we hover over it, it now pops those skills out. And actually, because you get this weird effect where if you go over here, it kind of bugs out. We can actually edit that by saying when you hover over the skills, instead of moving the skills itself, it'll move the actual PR skill. So what we can do is instead add the transition property to our PR skill. And since we already have a transform on this, it's not a big deal. We can just add our translate that we wrote already, and it just got rid of my scale of 0.9 still, but our translate is going to be what we have here. Or just copy this part and paste that here, and now we have that, so we can go ahead and get rid of this transform. We don't need it anymore, and so now you'll see we'll get that nice effect, and we don't have that weird bug anymore. And then just to keep the scale correct, we'll just keep that at 0.9 for now, because we don't want it to scale up when you actually have that pop out. And yeah, like I said, I might add some effects where maybe they all come out at different times and not all at the same time, because it looks kind of, I don't know if it looks too good with all of them coming out at the same time, especially if I had 5 of them in there at once. Yeah, so I'm just gonna run in here real quick and copy and paste and switch up the colors and the levels a little bit and just make this look a little bit nicer. Alright guys, well this was a super productive video, and we didn't get everything I was expecting to get done for this episode. I'm probably going to work on some stuff on my own, and then I can kind of fill you in on what I work on. But in this case, it was really cool to be able to go over the SVGs and actually how we're going to be animating these around and stuff like that. So, and we've got a cool little effect when we pop out. I'm probably going to do a little bit more with that because it looks a little bit static because everything just kind of stays in there. So I might have it so that they all pop out at different times. So it's kind of a nice flow when you open it. But I will mess around with that, and I will definitely update you guys in the next video. So if you guys are enjoying this so far, please make sure to like the video and comment with any questions below. If you guys want to see more of these, then definitely subscribe, because I'm going to be posting these regularly. So hit the little subscribe that's going to be right here. I'm circling it with my mouse. It's going to be right there. So just click on my face and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any content. And I will see you guys in the next episode.